So I want to. I'm bored. Like, it sucks being bored. I don't know what to do. Like,
On August 1st, 2019, multiple 911 calls from a residence in the 4800 block of Hodgson Corners Cove in Lithonia, Georgia, indicated a potential domestic disturbance involving 27-year-old Aleka Simmons and her boyfriend, 32-year-old Otis Dennis Walker. Initial police response officers, including DeKalb County Police Officer Derek Nunn, arrived at the home after a final call in which Simmons stated, "This is Aleka Simmons. If anything happens to me," followed by arguing heard in the background. Officers found the house dark and quiet and left the scene. Minutes later, responding units returned under significantly different circumstances. Inside the residence, a person was critically wounded, and shots were fired in the direction of law enforcement. A rapid escalation from an ambiguous emergency call to an active shooting prompted an extended law enforcement response and ultimately a manhunt for a suspect.
Breaking news this morning, a murder suspect on the run for a week, now captured. Otis Walker, wanted for killing his girlfriend and shooting a police officer multiple times, is in custody, tracked down in Lithonia last night. The DeKalb County Sheriff's Office fugitive unit arresting him. Police say Walker killed Aleka Simmons in a domestic dispute. DeKalb County Police Officer Derek Nunn was injured in a shootout with Walker. The officer still recovering and expected to be okay.
Stay with us as we unravel this shocking story and uncover the heartbreaking details of what led to this senseless loss. Before we begin, let us know in the comments, where are you watching from? And what are your thoughts as the story unfolds? Welcome to True Crime Tales, where we reveal the crimes that shock communities and the secrets hidden behind closed doors. These are real people, real events, real consequences. Hit subscribe and turn on notifications. You won't want to miss what's coming next. Now, let's begin. Aleka Simmons, age 27, was a resident of Lithonia, Georgia. Her life prior to her death was marked by the normal routines of a young adult engaged with her community and social circles. While specific details about her professional career remain limited, her presence in the community was evident through her social connections and online activity. She maintained a consistent engagement with her social media accounts, where her last post reflected appreciation for life and an awareness of the people around her. These posts, in hindsight, would serve as the final public record of her life before it was tragically ended. Friends and acquaintances described Aleka as cautious in her personal relationships, yet hopeful in her daily interactions. Despite ongoing tensions in her relationship with her partner, she maintained contact with friends and family, suggesting a pattern of maintaining support networks even under stressful personal circumstances. These connections included close communication with siblings, parents, and extended family, all of whom were aware of the relationship dynamics that occasionally caused concern. In her local community, Aleka was recognized by neighbors and peers as someone involved in social interactions and everyday communal activities, demonstrating a connection to the neighborhood that was disrupted by her death. Aleka's relationship history played a significant role in the events leading up to her death. She was in a long-term relationship with Otis Dennis Walker. Reports indicate that the relationship included periods of tension and domestic arguments, suggesting a pattern of conflict. Evidence shows that prior to the fatal incident, there had been steps taken to address these conflicts, including interactions with law enforcement and potentially seeking advice or intervention from friends and family. The presence of prior reports indicates a documented history of relational instability, highlighting risks that culminated in the events of August 1st, 2019. Otis Dennis Walker, age 32 at the time of the incident, was also a resident of Lithonia, Georgia. Details about his occupation or lifestyle are limited, but available records suggest that he maintained social connections within the community. Walker's criminal history includes previous arrests for domestic battery or assault, which established a documented pattern of violent behavior. It is not clear whether restraining orders or formal warnings have been issued, but prior interactions with law enforcement indicated a recognizable risk factor in his relationship with Aleka Simmons. Behavioral analysis of Walker shows escalating aggression towards Simmons over time. Reports suggest a history of controlling tendencies, with repeated instances of conflict during which Walker exhibited aggressive or coercive behavior. These patterns align with documented cases of domestic violence escalation, where previous incidents can act as indicators of increased risk for lethal outcomes. The relationship dynamics between Walker and Simmons were influenced by multiple factors, including emotional, financial, and social stressors. Witnesses noted signs of tension and controlling behavior, although interventions prior to the incident were limited. Observers familiar with the couple described instances where Walker's behavior had prompted concern, yet the escalation continued unchecked. These patterns provided critical context for law enforcement and investigators analyzing the events that led to Simmons' death. The events leading up to Aleka Simmons' death were preceded by multiple domestic incidents. In July 2019, the couple reportedly engaged in repeated arguments and altercations, which included threats and confrontations documented by family members or neighbors. These incidents suggest a pattern of escalating conflict. Records indicate that friends, family, and potentially law enforcement have been involved in an attempt to intervene or mediate, though these interventions were ultimately insufficient to prevent the fatal outcome. On the night of July 31st and into the early hours of August 1st, 2019, Aleka Simmons made multiple 911 calls. Several of these calls were hang-ups, indicating an attempt to seek help while under duress but without fully articulating the danger in real time. The final call, however, was more specific, with Simmons expressing fear for her life and identifying Walker as the source of the threat. This call established a documented timeline of danger and provided law enforcement with critical information about the situation inside the home. The timing and response of police to these calls have been scrutinized in subsequent investigations. Officers responded to the initial calls, arriving at the residence on Hodgson Corners, Cove, and Lithonia. At first, no signs of immediate disturbance were observed, and officers departed the scene after assessing that no visible threat was present. Within a narrow window of time following their departure, the fatal shooting occurred. This sequence of events has been analyzed in discussions about procedural standards and the challenges officers face in assessing domestic situations based solely on initial 911 reports. Environmental and contextual factors played a role in the escalation of the situation. The neighborhood, while residential and generally quiet, offered limited visibility and privacy for the home where the incident occurred. Social factors may have contributed as well. While detailed reports on alcohol or substance use were not publicly confirmed, broader contextual pressures, such as ongoing relationship tension, social expectations, and external stressors, likely influenced the dynamics that led to the confrontation. These factors combined to create conditions under which a single domestic incident could escalate rapidly to lethal violence. The lead-up demonstrates a series of risk indicators common in domestic violence cases. Prior documented conflict, visible tension between partners, and warnings communicated through 911 calls. These indicators collectively form a pattern that, if fully addressed, could provide opportunities for intervention. The case also illustrates the limitations faced by both friends and law enforcement when dealing with domestic disputes, especially when threats are communicated under duress and in ambiguous circumstances. On the night of August 1st, 2019, DeKalb County Emergency Dispatch received multiple calls from the home of 27-year-old Aleka Simmons in Lithonia, Georgia. The final call, just before midnight, was a report of imminent danger. Responding officers were dispatched immediately to the Hodgson Corners Cove residence. Upon arrival, the officers found a quiet house with no visible signs of a disturbance. The windows were dark, the doors locked, and there were no audible sounds indicating conflict inside. After a brief assessment, the officers concluded there was no immediate threat and left the scene. At that moment, neither the officers nor anyone in the neighborhood could have anticipated what would occur in the minutes that followed. The initial police response, though prompt, revealed missed opportunities that later became a critical point of investigation. Standard protocols for domestic calls typically require a thorough assessment of potential threats, especially in situations where the caller has indicated fear for their safety. In this instance, the officers relied on visible cues outside the home and a lack of disturbance inside to make their decision. Subtle signs of distress inside the residence went unnoticed, including evidence that someone was barricading themselves or preparing for confrontation. The brief window during which the officers left the scene would become decisive in the fatal sequence of events that unfolded inside the house. Within minutes of the police departure, the situation inside the home escalated rapidly. Aleka Simmons was located in an upstairs bedroom when the perpetrator, Otis Dennis Walker, initiated the attack. The layout of the home played a role in the unfolding of events. The house had a main entrance leading to a hallway, staircases to the upper floor, and multiple exits, including back doors and side windows. The bedroom where Simmons was located was positioned toward the rear of the house, providing a degree of privacy and isolation from neighbors. This configuration allowed Walker to act without immediate intervention from outside parties. Walker fired multiple shots inside the home, striking Aleka Simmons fatally. The sequence of shots indicated premeditation and an intent to target the victim directly. Ballistic analysis later confirmed trajectories consistent with deliberate aim rather than random firing. Walker then engaged with responding officers who arrived shortly after the fatal shooting. Officer Derek Nunn was struck multiple times during the confrontation, sustaining injuries that required hospitalization but were ultimately non-fatal. Walker fired a total of 19 rounds, directing fire both toward Simmons and at the officers as they attempted to secure the scene. The combination of residential layout, timing, and Walker's actions created a situation where law enforcement and the victim were unable to prevent the escalation until after significant harm had occurred. Following the shooting, Walker fled the residence into the surrounding area, entering the woods behind the house. The escape plan appeared to be rapid and calculated. Within minutes, law enforcement issued alerts to the local community, notifying neighbors of the ongoing threat and urging caution. Residents in the immediate area were made aware of the situation through radio communications and direct outreach by patrol units. The attack not only resulted in the death of Aleka Simmons, but also posed a continued threat to the public and responding officers until the perpetrator was apprehended. The subsequent manhunt involved multiple levels of law enforcement coordination. A blue alert, which is issued for cases involving threats to law enforcement officers, was activated statewide. The alert system informed both law enforcement agencies and the general public, providing details of the suspect, his last known location, and any vehicles associated with him. Media outlets broadcasted information regarding the manhunt, and community warnings were disseminated through local news channels and social media. Residents were asked to report any sightings, with law enforcement emphasizing the danger posed by the armed fugitive. Search operations were extensive and coordinated across multiple agencies, including DeKalb County Police, federal authorities, and specialized tactical units. Search patterns included canvassing nearby residences, patrolling wooded areas, and monitoring potential escape routes, such as gas stations and convenience stores. Officers systematically covered the neighborhood, focusing on locations where Walker could have fled or attempted to blend in. Evidence collection at the crime scene informed search strategies, including ballistic data, known habits of the suspect, and any items left at the home. Public involvement played a significant role in the manhunt.
Breaking news this morning, a murder suspect on the run for a week, now captured. Otis Walker, wanted for killing his girlfriend and shooting a police officer multiple times, is in custody, tracked down in Lithonia last night. The DeKalb County Sheriff's Office fugitive unit arresting him. Police say Walker killed Aleka Simmons in a domestic dispute. DeKalb County police officer Derek Nunn was injured in a shootout with Walker. The officer still recovering and expected to be okay.
Law enforcement offer rewards for information leading to the suspect's capture. Tips from neighbors and local residents were collected and cross-referenced against police intelligence. Social media dissemination amplified the reach of the alerts, increasing the number of eyes watching for Walker. Community members were advised to maintain distance and report sightings rather than attempt to intervene, ensuring safety while contributing to the investigative effort. The manhunt concluded with Walker's arrest at a gas station several days later. Officers approached the suspect in a controlled environment, taking precautions to avoid further harm. At the point of capture, Walker complied with law enforcement instructions. The arrest procedure included a thorough search for weapons and verification of identity. Evidence recovered from the suspect included firearm consistent with the ballistics report, personal items linking him to the crime scene, and digital devices used to track his movements. The capture effectively ended the immediate threat to the community and allowed investigators to proceed with the legal process. In the aftermath, law enforcement conducted a detailed review of the police response, the timeline of the shooting, and the sequence of events that led to the fatal outcome. The analysis highlighted gaps in communication, assessment procedures, and situational awareness that can inform future responses to domestic violence calls. The case demonstrated the rapid escalation potential in intimate partner violence incidents and the critical importance of thorough evaluation during initial police contact. The fatal shooting of Aleka Simmons and the ambush of Officer Derek Nunn underscore the intertwined risks to civilians and first responders. The manhunt that followed involved precise coordination, public cooperation, and systematic investigative strategies. The arrest of Walker allowed for the collection of crucial evidence and the initiation of criminal proceedings that would lead to conviction. This incident emphasizes the importance of immediate, thorough police assessment in domestic disputes, the unpredictability of domestic violence escalations, and the necessity of rapid, coordinated law enforcement response during active threat situations. From initial dispatch to the capture of the suspect, the case illustrates the sequence of procedural and tactical events that define law enforcement engagement in high-risk domestic situations. The sequence, from miscues during initial response through the fatal shooting to the statewide manhunt and eventual arrest, provides a comprehensive overview of the operational and investigative dimensions of this critical case. The investigation into the murder of Aleka Simmons began immediately after law enforcement secured the scene. The house on Hodgin Corners Cove in Lithonia, Georgia, was treated as an active crime scene. Officers cordoned off the property, ensuring no unauthorized personnel could interfere with the evidence. Crime scene investigators conducted a meticulous examination of both the interior and exterior of the home, documenting every element that could shed light on the events leading up to and following Simmons' death. Physical evidence at the scene included multiple bullet casings, the firearm used by the perpetrator, and bloodstains consistent with gunshot trauma. Investigators cataloged each item with precise location coordinates to reconstruct the events within the house. The placement of the bloodstains and bullet casings allowed for a detailed reconstruction of the sequence of events, showing trajectory and angle of each shot. Forensic analysts determined the distance from which the shots were fired and identified the positions of both the victim and the perpetrator at the time of the shooting. These findings were crucial in establishing intent, the level of planning involved, and the violent nature of the attack. Investigators collected phone records and reviewed multiple 911 calls placed by Aleka Simmons prior to the fatal incident. The final communications showed clear indications of imminent danger. Timestamps on the calls were used to establish a timeline of events, demonstrating that law enforcement responded to a series of hang-ups and distress calls before the fatal shooting occurred. The transcript provided insight into the escalating tension between Simmons and Otis Walker, as well as the immediacy of the threat she faced. These records were essential in proving that Simmons sought help and that the attack occurred within a narrow window of time following her final attempts to contact authorities. Ballistics analysis revealed that 19 rounds were fired during the incident. Each round was meticulously documented and compared with firearms recovered from the suspect. The forensic examination confirmed that all bullets matched the gun in Walker's possession, directly linking him to the crime. Trajectory analyses indicated shots were fired from multiple positions within the home, including at law enforcement officers responding to the scene. The combination of ballistic evidence and physical positioning demonstrated deliberate targeting of both Simmons and the responding officer, establishing the premeditated and violent nature of the assault. Witness statements were collected from neighbors, friends, and family members, providing context and history that contributed to the case. Neighbors reported hearing arguments and disturbances prior to the shooting, and some noted prior incidents of physical confrontation between Simmons and Walker. Friends and family corroborated Simmons' fears and confirmed previous instances of abuse. These statements helped establish a documented pattern of domestic violence and reinforced the prosecution's assertion that the murder was a culmination of ongoing threats and aggression. Witness testimony also provided context for the behavior of the perpetrator during the manhunt, offering insights into his state of mind and prior actions. Once Walker was apprehended, legal proceedings were initiated. He faced multiple charges, including malice murder, felony murder, aggravated assault, assault on a law enforcement officer, and unlawful possession of a firearm. Each charge was supported by the evidence collected at the scene, forensic analyses, phone records, and witness testimony. The trial preparation was extensive. Prosecutors compiled all physical evidence, digital communications, ballistic reports, and witness statements into a comprehensive case file. Expert witnesses, including forensic analysts and law enforcement officers, were prepared to testify regarding the sequence of events, crime scene analysis, and the ballistic findings. Defense attorneys formulated their strategy, claiming that Walker acted in self-defense and alleging provocation by law enforcement. The prosecution countered this by emphasizing the repeated history of domestic violence, premeditation, and the deliberate targeting of both the victim and responding officers. The trial began with jury selection, carefully ensuring an unbiased panel. Opening statements outlined the sequence of events and established a framework for the prosecution's case. Witnesses were called to testify in detail about the events leading up to the murder, the crime scene, and the actions of Walker during and after the shooting. Physical evidence, including bullet casings, firearms, and bloodstain patterns, was presented alongside digital evidence, such as phone records and 911 transcripts. Cross-examination of defense witnesses challenged claims of self-defense, highlighting inconsistencies in the documented history of domestic violence. Throughout the proceedings, the prosecution consistently demonstrated a pattern of escalation and intent, supporting the charges of malice and felony murder. After reviewing all evidence, the jury found Walker guilty on all counts. Their decision reflected consideration of the documented pattern of abuse, forensic evidence, witness testimony, and the deliberate actions taken by the perpetrator during the incident. The verdict confirmed that the killing of Aleka Simmons was intentional and premeditated, and that the attack on law enforcement officers was a deliberate act of violence. The sentencing phase of the trial established Walker's punishment as life in prison, without the possibility of parole, plus an additional 65 years.
Also, all new at 4 o'clock, a Lithonia man convicted of murder and shooting an officer will spend the rest of his life behind bars, we've learned. Otis Walker has been sentenced to life plus 65 years for killing his girlfriend, Aleka Simmons. Now, he also fired at officers as they responded. This happened inside a home in Lithonia in 2019. Jurors found Walker guilty of multiple charges, including felony murder and 3 counts of aggravated assault of a law enforcement officer.
This sentence reflected the severity of the crimes, the targeting of a civilian and a law enforcement officer, and the need to provide both accountability and deterrence. Family members of Aleka Simmons were present in the courtroom during sentencing, and statements were made regarding the impact of her death and the necessity of justice being served. Friends and community members noted the relief in seeing the judicial system recognize the gravity of the offenses. Law enforcement officers involved in the response and investigation acknowledged the importance of the sentence in reinforcing the risks associated with domestic violence calls and the need for protective measures during such responses. The outcome of this case carries broader implications for domestic violence awareness, law enforcement protocols, and public safety. It underscores the importance of rapid and thorough responses to distress calls, highlights the risks posed to first responders, and emphasizes the need for proactive intervention in domestic abuse situations. Additionally, the case serves as a precedent in demonstrating that a combination of forensic evidence, digital communications, and witness testimony can create a comprehensive and compelling case against perpetrators of intimate partner violence. The sentencing also signals to the community the consequences of such actions and reinforces a commitment of the judicial system to protecting victims and holding offenders accountable. The fatal shooting of Aleka Simmons in Lithonia, Georgia, on August 1st, 2019, occurred within a broader environment marked by persistent challenges in addressing domestic violence. Intimate partner homicides continue to represent a significant portion of violent deaths in Georgia, reflecting systemic issues in prevention, reporting, and intervention. According to state crime statistics, Georgia consistently records hundreds of domestic violence-related fatalities annually, with a substantial percentage involving female victims and male perpetrators. These incidents disproportionately affect urban and suburban areas, where population density and social stressors can complicate emergency response and community monitoring. Analysis of demographic trends indicates that victims often share histories of prior reported abuse, suggesting that prior interactions with law enforcement do not always prevent escalation to lethal outcomes. Repeat offenders are frequently involved, and cases often highlight gaps in communication, monitoring, and enforcement of protective orders. The Simmons case fits within this pattern, illustrating how systemic gaps in domestic violence intervention can have fatal consequences. Law enforcement protocols for domestic disturbances have been scrutinized in the wake of cases like Simmons. Standard procedure typically includes dispatching officers to the reported location, assessing immediate risk, interviewing involved parties, and documenting the situation. However, in situations where initial signs of physical harm are not apparent, officers may be forced to rely on procedural discretion, leaving potential threats unaddressed. In the Simmons case, responding officers arrived following multiple 911 calls and hang-ups from the victim, but left after observing no immediate danger. The timeline indicates that the absence of visible indicators contributed to the perpetrator's ability to carry out the homicide without immediate interference. This sequence has prompted law enforcement agencies to revisit their response protocols, emphasizing the importance of thorough assessments even when threats are not overt. Recommendations for earlier intervention include implementing enhanced risk assessment tools, mandating follow-up visits for repeat calls, improving coordination with social services, and increasing training on recognizing subtle indicators of imminent danger. Agencies are also considering expanded use of technology, including GPS tracking of high-risk individuals and improved communication channels between dispatch and responding units. The Simmons incident highlights the inherent risks faced by law enforcement during domestic violence calls. Officer Derek Nunn, who responded to the 911 calls, sustained multiple gunshot injuries when the perpetrator fired at law enforcement upon their return. This underscores the dangers that domestic calls pose, as officers must contend with volatile situations often involving firearms, heightened emotions, and unpredictable behavior. The incident demonstrates that even routine dispatches can escalate into life-threatening encounters. In response, agencies have increased focus on training programs that simulate high-risk domestic situations, emphasizing tactical awareness, protective positioning, and rapid threat assessment. Preparedness measures also include equipping officers with enhanced personal protective equipment, ensuring backup availability, and providing continuous professional development on domestic violence dynamics. These strategies aim to reduce officer vulnerability and improve outcomes in future incidents where domestic violence intersects with armed resistance. The aftermath of Aleka Simmons' death extended beyond the immediate crime scene and legal proceedings, affecting her family, friends, and the broader community. Family members initiated efforts to highlight domestic violence awareness, advocating for prevention strategies, and sharing cautionary guidance based on Simmons' prior interactions with law enforcement. Social media platforms became a conduit for memorialization, with campaigns dedicated to her memory and reminders of the risks associated with intimate partner abuse. These campaigns focus on factual reporting of domestic violence trends, educational content, and resource dissemination for individuals in potentially dangerous relationships. Community reactions included organized vigils, press coverage, and local activism aimed at informing residents about domestic violence patterns and emergency response resources. Civic groups and advocacy organizations leveraged the case to call for policy reforms, emphasizing the need for earlier intervention, better risk monitoring, and comprehensive support structures for potential victims. These responses serve both informational and preventative functions, providing clear examples of how domestic violence escalations could be mitigated through community engagement and proactive law enforcement practices. Policy discussion following the incident focused on reviewing domestic violence response procedures. Recommendations included mandatory risk assessment training, establishing specialized domestic violence units, integrating mental health professionals in emergency response, and improving communication between social services and law enforcement. Emphasis was placed on continuous evaluation of protocols, with a goal of preventing future fatalities and minimizing first responder exposure to lethal threats. A comprehensive understanding of the Simmons case relies on thorough documentation compiled throughout the investigation and trial. Key components include multiple calls were placed by Simmons, including repeated hang-ups and a final call expressing imminent threat. Audio recordings provide real-time evidence of her state and the urgency of the situation. Detailed images and schematics of Hodgson Corners Cove residents illustrate point of entry, shooting locations, and spatial relationships relevant to forensic analysis. Documentation also includes bullet casings, blood evidence, and furniture arrangement to assess movement and line of fire patterns. Records include officers' initial observations, follow-up interviews, evidence logs, and statements from neighbors or witnesses. Notes chronologically detail the sequence of events from the first dispatch to the apprehension of the suspect. Trial documents record witness testimonies, cross-examinations, and presentation of forensic evidence. Sentencing statements include judicial rationale, legal findings, and justification for life imprisonment plus additional years. Autopsy confirms cause of death, bullet trajectory, and corroborates forensic evidence collected from the crime scene. Forensic reports also evaluate weapon performance, shot angles, and distance assessments, supporting prosecution arguments. Media reports trace the chronology of events, from the initial homicide to manhunt, trial, and sentencing. Public reactions, community statements, and coverage of vigils provide context for societal response and policy discourse. The Aleka Simmons case represents a comprehensive example of systemic challenges in addressing domestic violence in Georgia. It underscores the complexities of emergency response, risk assessment, and law enforcement preparedness. The broader context illustrates patterns of intimate partner homicides, demographic trends, and repeat offender dynamics. Policy reviews and recommendations following the incident aim to enhance early intervention, improve officer safety, and strengthen support structures for potential victims. The aftermath reveals societal engagement, advocacy efforts, and community-driven awareness campaigns, serving both to memorialize Simmons and to inform strategies that may prevent future fatalities. Documentation from 911 calls, crime scene evidence, trial proceedings, and forensic analysis forms a robust factual record, providing a complete account of the incident, investigation, and legal outcomes. This structured, evidence-driven approach ensures a clear understanding of the case, emphasizing accountability, prevention, and operational lessons for law enforcement agencies. If you found this story as gripping and heartbreaking as we did, don't forget to like this video and share it with others. And if you want to hear more true crime stories that uncover the mysteries behind these tragic events, make sure to subscribe to our channel and turn on the notification bell. You won't want to miss our latest stories, updates, and discussions. Thank you for joining us on this journey to seek justice and explore the truth. Together, we can make a difference. Until next time, stay safe and stay aware.